Hello and good morning. Thank you for welcoming me back after 2 weeks away in Japan. And a huge thanks to my coworkers for covering for me on these live casts while I was gone. Hopefully you had a good time with all of them. I think 5 different people were here, which is wonderful that you got to spend some time with my delightful coworkers. I see some people are already joining in with some comments about various topics, including Garrett mentions a question about the charity auction, which is now live on our web store. It looks like this. Here we go. There it is. Here is the charity auction, which is actually, I said it was on our web store. It's not. It's on Board Game Geek right now. You can get a link through the our newsletter, which I usually link to in the description of this video. I'll do that in post, but you can find the link on our website if you don't get the newsletter. It's under the news section. But yeah, the charity auction is live. I'll talk about that a little bit today, but I'll address Garrett's question really quick, which is that for each of the winners of the charity auction, they'll get to create a custom Wormspan box where they get to choose any dragon from the game to be on the front of the box. And they can also choose the dragons for each of the 5 sides of the box, or the 4 other sides of the box. Garrett asked me which dragons I would choose. I would definitely choose Wadi. Wadi is a dragon inspired by Walter behind me right now and my late cat Biddy. And definitely choose that, probably for the cover dragon. And then I would choose one of the Asian inspired dragons. I think there's a red one that's really, really beautiful. And at least one of the cute big-eyed hatchling dragons. I think they're adorable too. I don't know what the other ones would be, but I know Wadi would be on the top. In fact, I have some art from the designer, from the illustrator Clementine of Wadi. Mark says that he had hope I had fun in Japan. He says last year he went for the cherry blossom season, very busy but beautiful. How was everything during November? So Mark, I think cherry blossom season is beautiful in Japan. I think the most beautiful time in Japan, though, is the Koyo season, when the momiji, the kind of the maple trees with really small leaves, I think they're in the maple family of trees. When they change color in the fall, it is stunning. It is absolutely beautiful. And I thought I had timed the trip well to see those trees changing color, but we were a little bit early. Even when we went to the mountains of Nagano, we didn't see many trees changing color. It was still beautiful, but not quite as beautiful as it'll be probably in like 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, it was still beautiful when we were there. And the weather was very nice for us to walk around. We had a few rainy days, but for the most part, it was great weather. We had like 20,000 steps a day. We got a lot of walking in during our time in Japan. Chad says, how was jet lag? Jet lag is a little rough right now. It was fine going there, but on the way back, we've been falling asleep during dinner at times. And last night we went to bed at like 9 o'clock. Normally we go to bed at around 11 o'clock. But yeah, it's been pretty rough. Like we're watching right now, one of my favorite shows ever has its new final season, Arcane, on Netflix. Incredible show. Visually up there with the most beautiful shows I've ever seen. And I cannot stay awake during this show because of jet lag. And I keep waking up really early. This morning I got the closest to my normal wake up time of around 7 o'clock. I woke up around 6:30 today. It's been rough. Yeah. Coming back from Japan. Carol says, now that your big trip is over, what 2024 games do you still want to get to the table before the end of the year? That's a fun question, Carol. And I did actually have some games waiting for me when I got back, games that I maybe ordered on crowdfunding a while ago or pre-ordered. Among them were SETI, which I have since played, 2 campaign games, the Tidal Blades campaign game, and the Star Realms campaign game are up there. There are a few other ones. There's Diatoms and Conquest Princess. I think that's the name of it, that are up there as well. But those campaign games are probably at the top of my list. Yeah, there are a few other little ones over there, but those are the big ones that I really want to play by the end of the year. There are many other games that I won't get to play in time for this year, but I'll get to play them maybe at Geekway to the West next year. What about you? That's a fun question for everyone. What 2024 releases are you the most eager to play? That whether they're on your shelf or that you have a friend or a store or game cafe that has a copy, then you're looking forward to playing in the near future. I'm also looking forward to playing the new Seven Wonders Duel, the Duel for Middle Earth, and I'm going to play that this weekend, I think. Speaking of game cafes, I did go to 2 game cafes in Japan, one in Kanazawa, which was a delight, just a tiny little game cafe in Kanazawa that I recommend. I think it's called, it had a few names on it. It was called like Game Bar and also Hello World. I'm not sure the exact name, but if you look up Game Cafe in Kanazawa, if you're ever there, I highly recommend it. And we also went to the DICE, DYCE Game Cafe in Tokyo, which was also, we had a great time there as well. Let's see. Nicole says, these jade eggs are very impressive. So yeah, the jade eggs, Nicole's referring to these. So they're stone. They're made to look like jade, but they are stone eggs. And Nicole says, are they really made of stone, as the description says? They are. Yeah, they are. They're actual stone eggs that our manufacturer was able to make with a really beautiful pattern, in my opinion. In fact, I have them right here. I'm looking at my other screen as if I can't talk about them. But yeah, you can hear the clickety-clack. Here, I shake that. Yeah. And yeah, I'll pull them out here so you can see what they look like. In fact, I have all three things today to hold up to you and show to you on camera, not just on the other screen. So here are the jade eggs. Actually, I keep saying jade. They are stone eggs made to look like jade. I don't want you to think that you're getting actual jade, because that is not the case. But here is what they look like. You can, I don't know if you can hear that on the mic. But yeah. Yeah, they have a nice weight. In fact, they're kind of cool to the touch. They're cold to the touch because they are actual stone. I'm really actually rather amazed that they were able to make these look so much like jade, and in the same size and shape as wormspan eggs. In fact, they can work for wingspan too. They don't just have to work for a wormspan. The other things that we have, I have a few comments. I've seen a few comments about jet lag. I'll get to those in a second. So we have these enamel pins that we made. Originally, we made them for Gen Con as kind of a special, but we ended up making extras. So there are these big metal enamel pins inspired by several specific dragons in Wormspan. And yeah, they're delightful. I don't really get into these types of like little collectibles, but they are really, really cute. I really like how they turned out. And I appreciate my entire team really for giving feedback about these, and Clementine for creating these dragons. She created the pin specifically for Wormspan. But yeah, so if you like having these types of pins, you can get them on our web store now. And the last thing is a tray variety pack. This is something I've wanted to make for a while, just kind of for people who want to organize our games or any games a little bit nicer in a modular way. We now have this pack of trays. So they're trays that are familiar from our games, right? You probably saw this in the nesting box for Wingspan. This is the tray that we use for Wingspan, but with a clear lid. And then two trays that were originally in Libertalia, but now we use them for a few other games as well. But we're putting it out today because they're ready, and because they're relevant to Wormspan in particular. This is a good way to store Wormspan stuff. But also, just if you want a better way to store Stonemaier games, and maybe the game didn't come with a plastic tray, or here's a solution for you. So you can get this on our web store right now, along with the enamel pins and the stone eggs. For the stone eggs in particular, for every copy that we sell during the charity auction, which is going on for the next 48 hours, we're going to donate $1 to each of the 10 charity auctions that were selected by the content creators for the auction. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but wanted to mention that if you are considering the stone eggs and you want to support the charities that are as part of in the auction, make sure you buy them in the next 48 hours. Stefan has a tip about jet lag. You need 1 day for each hour of jet lag. Yeah, okay. I like that. I don't know if that helps me actually recover, but it helps me give me a timeline, which I appreciate. Oh, Carol says that she's 3 games into Star Realms Legacy. We're enjoying it. Quick games. Oh, that's helpful, I think, for Legacy and campaign games. Anthony says, how did it go using your Japanese in Japan? I studied Japanese for 4 years in university, but I've forgotten so much, and trying to remember how to say things on the spot was difficult. I could definitely relate to that. I would say, pleasantly surprised. I have not spoken Japanese in 23 years, but that was when I studied abroad in Kyoto. But a lot of it came back to me for the trip, more than I expected. Like I would what really helped actually was eavesdropping, but hopefully not in an obtrusive way, because I wasn't understanding everything someone was saying, but I was oftentimes listening to people around me and listening to the words that they were saying. And it was really, really helpful for me to remember these words that I had forgotten. Sometimes I had to look them up, but after I did, I was able to repeat them and start using those words better. It also helped for me to listen to the Learn Japanese with Masa Sensei podcast, which is on Spotify and other platforms. I listened to that for many months leading up to the trip, and that was really helpful to get me to remember the grammar and the words that I once knew. So I was pleasantly surprised. I kind of jumped right back into it. There were definitely a lot of things that I couldn't say that I wanted to say to better express myself and my personality, but I was pleasantly surprised. It also helped that one of the friends I was traveling with also had studied in Japan. So there were many times where we would play off one another. We would kind of take turns ordering sometimes. And yeah, we kind of just helped each other with grammar and words and stuff like that. That was really helpful. Zachary says, how safe does Japan feel? I'm interested in taking a trip there, but I'm always a bit nervous about visiting new countries. I would say, I mean, there are probably other countries that I don't know about, but I would say that Japan is one of the safest countries in the world. Never for a moment did we not feel safe in Japan. And we were walking around in all sorts of places of various cities in the morning, at night, narrow alleyways and things like that. It's clean. People look out for you. And it's incredibly safe. Really, really incredibly safe. Yeah, I can't say. I really can't say more than that. Japan, we always felt incredibly safe in Japan. In fact, there weren't even any of those moments where we were like, "Oh, we shouldn't feel safe right now," because it's incredibly safe. Yeah, it's one of the really wonderful things about Japan. Joshua says, did any cafes or game shops ask you to sign their copies of Stonemaier Games? They did not. No, one store was completely oblivious that I had any connection to Stonemaier Games. That was the one in Tokyo, except for the owner knew, but the owner wasn't actually there that day. And in Kanazawa, I did introduce myself. In fact, I was wearing a Stonemaier shirt, and I held up their copy of Wingspan. I was like, "Hey, we make this game," and we had a fun interaction with the owner there. But didn't ask me to sign anything, which I would be happy to do. But although Wingspan isn't a game that I designed, so I always feel a little odd about signing that one. Moody Magic Maple says, any Canadian conventions I should consider going to pitch my games? I'm a student, so it's tough finding conventions close. I would actually recommend, I don't think you need to go to conventions to pitch your games. Rather, I would pick the publishers that you think are a good fit for your game and go to their website and learn about their submission processes. There's also a video on my YouTube channel called like 4 Steps to Pitch Your Game. And there you'll see that conventions aren't really a big part of that unless that's specific to a publisher. Some publishers might say on their submission websites that you need to go to a convention to pitch to them. But a lot of them won't. A lot of them will have submission forms or other ways to submit your game to them. Let's see. Nate says, how might the proposed tariffs by the next U.S. president affect the board game industry from both a publisher and a consumer perspective? They would be really bad. If they actually happen, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. So Trump has proposed a 60% tariff on all goods imported from China. Most board games are made in China because they specialize in making a lot of different little components that aren't even made anywhere else in the world. China has kind of specialized in making these little tiny components that go in various products, electronics and board games among them. And so what would happen is if you have a game that costs $10, normally that game would retail for around $50 to $60. If these proposed tariffs go through or passed and are retained, it would mean that $10 game would now essentially cost $16 to get into, the landed cost would be $16 instead of $10. So instead of being a $50 to $60 game, that would be close to a $80 to $90 game. And so you can see that has an impact on, that's an impact on the consumer. The publisher also might decide to eat a little bit of that cost. And so if the publisher says, okay, we're going to eat a little bit of the cost, we'll make a little bit less profit, we'll charging 50 to 60, we'll charge 75. And so the publisher is eating some cost and the consumer is also being hurt there as well. I think the new U.S. president is under the the misbelief that by adding these tariffs, that this manufacturing will move to the U.S. It will not. It's not going to happen, especially for these types of components, these types of products like board games. And so it just will hurt customers and companies in the U.S. That is my opinion, obviously, but I think that's my opinion of what will happen. It will be really, really bad for everyone, for companies and for U.S. citizens. Carol says, can you talk about your involvement with the Ink board game? So yeah, there's a little mention at the end of the newsletter. You can see it way down here. So this is not a Stonemaier Games thing. I did mention it down here in the newsletter, but it's not a Stonemaier Games thing. I am personally involved as an investor and a consultant in a new digital roguelike game that's being designed and developed by Akram Studios, the company that makes Charterstone. So they are working on this game called Inkborn, and I'm really excited about it. The visuals are incredible. I've played multiple versions of it. Still has a long way to go in terms of game design and game development, but what I've played so far has been a joy to play. And my involvement is as an investor, personally, not Stonemaier Games, me, Jamey, as an investor and as a consultant to make the game really cool and make it unique and special, make it familiar to those who like games like Slay the Spire, but also where it really does add something new to the medium and to the genre of roguelike deck builders. And I think they're doing it. I think we're doing it. Yeah, we're working together on this. So yeah, if that is a genre of video game, of digital game that you really enjoy, I highly recommend following along, putting it on your wish list. If you go to the Steam page, let's see if I can put it on the Steam page. Yeah. So if you go to the Steam page for it, you can click here to follow it. But I also recommend going down here to add it to your wish list, which I thought I did add it to my wish list. Did not? Okay. Yeah, I clicked that earlier. It didn't seem to register. But yeah, it has this origami look to it that I am really excited about. We'll get back to the newsletter here if I can. There we go. But yeah, thanks for asking about that, Carol. Steven says, I'm curious how many Stonemaier games did you come across in the Japanese game market and in what languages? So I visited a kind of a famous store in Japan called Yellow Submarine. It's a game store. They have several locations in Tokyo at the very least. I went to one in, I think it was in Shinjuku, the one that we went to in Tokyo. And I found most of our games there. Most of our games are there. You could see I posted a photo on Instagram of me pointing at various games in Japanese. They're Japanese language versions of our games. We work with a company called ArcLight in Japan to bring our games there. I did notice, though, one observation I had while I was in the store is that definitely the most popular games in the store were games that came in boxes that were about this big. So our games are a little big, I think, for the Japanese market, but they were there. They are selling, and yeah, so I was very excited to see them. And yeah, they were all in Japanese. Julio says that my coworkers, my crew did great in the last 2 weeks covering for me when I was gone. Have I watched the live cast? I haven't watched the live. I haven't, no, but I should. I have a hard time watching myself on recordings, but I'm not in those recordings. So yeah, I should watch them to follow along and see what they talked about. G-Money says, what games did you end up bringing with you to Japan? So I bought a new to me game called Flip 7, a push your luck game. And I took that box and I kept Flip 7 in it. I took out the insert and I put into it the game called The Gang, which is a new cooperative poker themed game. And I also put in another cooperative game that I just received called Tranquility the Ascent. So I packed all those inside this tiny box. I think The Gang was the best one of all of them to bring, not in terms of game quality. It is a great game, but because it comes with a full deck of playing cards. And so if you bring The Gang on a trip, you also have a full deck of playing cards as part of the game that you can use for classic games like spades and hearts and things like that. We played all of those games on the trip. All of them worked out really well. We weren't always up for playing games after a long day. Sometimes our day went from start to finish. Like we were just going the entire day and we came back and fell right asleep. But sometimes we did come back and just kind of relax at the end of the day. We also spent several evenings in game cafes playing other games like King Domino. We played Just One. The Just One game was particularly fun because we were playing with some other people who invited me to go to this game cafe who spoke other languages. They spoke English, but they also spoke German. They were from Switzerland. And what else did I play recently? I've been playing a lot of Pokemon TCG Pocket and really enjoying it, even though I know nothing about Pokemon. And we played a little bit of Strike and Bonanza at one of the game cafes. And just yesterday, I learned and played SETI with my friend Henry, and that was a lot of fun too. That's a new big box heavy game. That's a pretty cool game. Let's see. Moody Magic Maple often says, "Does anyone know a good place to find playtesters? Tabletop Discord, perhaps?" That's a good question. I would recommend going to our website under how to design a tabletop game, and you can see a whole section about finding playtesters on that page. In fact, given your questions, I'd recommend checking out that page on our website in particular. Here, I will show you where to find it just to make that easier for you. Let's see, how can I do this easily? I will click through to Stuff We Love. Click through there. If you go to Stuff, don't worry about this page itself. Go to How to Design a Tabletop Game. And it's on this page that you'll see playtest your game. You can see a lot of different ways to find playtesters and to hire playtesters, things like that. Yeah. Sam's looking forward to playing Endeavor Deep Sea. I'm looking forward to playing that as well. I don't have a copy of that one, though. Chad says, a buddy and I finally played Everdell for the first time. We were both surprised how lost we felt throughout the game. Thoughts on Everdell and its onboarding experience? Is it just me? It is not just you. Everdell is a game that I had a really not so good first experience with the game, other than the art and the world. I love the art and the world in Everdell. But the first time I played, I really didn't get the action optimization, where extending your round in Everdell is a big part of the play. Trying to find some other way to get like a free card or free resources, or using the cards that you have. It is not just a worker placement game. And so I really struggled with that on my first play. I'm glad I got it back to the table because I really do love Everdell. Once I figured out that optimization puzzle, it reminds me a lot of Lost Ruins of Arnak. So I don't know what that is about the onboarding experience, but I think part of it is that the game looks like a worker placement game, and it partially is. But most of what you're doing and how the different ways of how you are extending your round are related to the cards that you're playing in your tableau, not the workers that you're placing. George says, what was your most delicious disc that you tried in Japan, which by definition you knew about but totally blew your mind and tasted different than expected? Ooh, that's a good question. We ate a lot of really good food there. A lot of good little treats. Like I brought back a lot of poke and topo. These are delicious. We had several elaborate meals at the traditional inns, the ryokan, where we stayed, that were amazing. One of which was one of the best meals of my life, I would say, where we had grilled fish. We had a lot of fish, a lot of seafood. In Kanazawa, we had something called a delicacy called nodogudo, which is a black throat fish, a deep throat fish, or a deep sea fish. That was really delicious. We had some really, really good sashimi, some fatty tuna that was really delicious. And then we had some really good, like less expensive meals that were also really, really tasty. We had some really good ramen, including one of my favorite ramen restaurants in the world called Ippudo. That was in Tokyo. And then near the end of the trip, we had several dishes where we had big fried shrimp on top of rice, with one had a runny egg on it. That was really good. And then one of our last meals of the trip was Japanese curry, which is kind of a dark brown curry, and almost a black curry at this one place that we went called Go-Go Curry, with this shrimp on it. And it was so good. It was so good. I brought back some of the curry here, so I'm going to try to replicate it here. I know it won't come close, but it was really, really good. If you ever go to Japan, find a Go-Go Curry. It's in train stations and random places. I can't express how good it was for like just like a $6 meal. So good. Yeah. We ate a lot of good food there. Let's see. Garrett's excited about Inkborn as well. He says the combo discovery system looks really innovative and a nice hook. That is one of the main hooks about this game, the combo discovery system, where when you play certain types of cards, it will they'll create combos that you don't know exist until you play those cards. It's kind of like on an old game controller when you happen to hit like AAB and something happens. You're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that AAB did that. And then from then on, the game helps you remember that combo so you can use it in the future. It even looks at the cards in your hand and says, hey, you discovered this combo previously. You have these cards in hand if you want to try this combo on this turn. So the game, it doesn't require memory once you discover the combo. But yeah, and Garrett, thank you for offering for playtesters. Yeah, I won't be necessarily in charge of playtesters, but I am, once the game is in a good state for external playtesters to try out, I will definitely bring in some people like you. I know you're a great playtester. So I'll definitely be doing that. Carol says, have I heard about Lands of Evershade? It launches on GameFound tomorrow, and after watching Board Game Co's video, it sounds like the type of adventure game you might like with little emphasis on combat. I am certainly intrigued by it. I think my only hesitation is that the game that I've wanted to exist and that does the types of things that Lands of Evershade does is and will be Vantage. Vantage does all those things for me. So I might try it, but it's also a campaign game, and Vantage isn't a campaign game, which is what I kind of want out of these games now. I don't want a commitment to it. I just want to stand and play it for a little bit. Maybe. It does look beautiful. It does look pretty stunning. And I agree that the emphasis on combat is very small. But I'm also just really excited to play Vantage a bunch, even after playing it so many times. And I'm saying this partially because we just got the really nice prototype of Vantage to the table in person, not the other day with some coworkers. And it's everything I hoped it would be. Like it's turning out really, really well. I need to start working on my next update for it. But yeah, anyway, I am hoping to try Lands of Evershade. It does look like a really cool game. Viz says, how do you navigate finding the right theming for an interesting mechanism that you have? That's a good question. I usually can't go too deep into a mechanism until I have a theme for it. I don't have a magical method for it, but usually when I have a mechanism that I'm really excited about, I am immediately actively thinking about, how does this mechanism make sense? Like in what theme does this mechanism make sense? And it goes the other way too. I have certain themes that I want to work with that are on my list of themes that I want to play around with. And I'm often pairing them with different mechanisms that I think may or may not work well for that specific theme. So a lot of this is like pencil and paper brainstorming. That's what works for me when I'm trying to pair different themes with mechanisms. Anthony says, any new inspirations from Japan, from your Japanese trip for future games? I had a few ideas while I was there. One key connection to Japan is Tokaido, which is now a Stonemaier game. Tokaido and the Tokaido brand is a Stonemaier brand now. And I went to one of the places that's mentioned specifically in Tokaido, which is this place where snow monkeys go and get into this really hot spring. It's a pretty incredible place. Like you just go to this place and you see snow monkeys hanging out in this hot spring. It was a little warm for them to be in the hot spring when we were there. And so we only saw 2 snow monkeys at this hot spring, but it is like, if you play Tokaido and you find the snow monkey cards, that's where we were. We were in that exact place. That's a really cool place to go. And so while I was there, I was thinking a little bit about what the future of Tokaido could be, or the future of like the next game in that line. So I was thinking a little bit about that while I was there. Susanna said, how much did it feel like you were playing Let's Go to Japan while you were traveling? Did you have any days that gave you a happiness boost? I love that question, Susanna. And really, yeah, playing Let's Go to Japan leading up to Japan, the Japan trip, was really, really helpful. And one of the things the game does that I think really captures the experience of Japan is the idea of just going on a walk, not having a specific place to go, or even if you have a specific place to go, but just enjoying the walk on the way there. There were certain times while we were there that I felt we were looking too much at our phones to be like, okay, we're trying to get to this specific place. Let's take this specific route to get there. And after a few days of it, I was kind of like, hey, let's put our phones away and just enjoy the walk. We know we're going northwest. Let's walk northwest and just enjoy the walk. Or just like not having a specific restaurant to go to, just saying, okay, let's walk around for a while and see what we find. That is one of you can do that in like dense cities, and Japan is full of dense cities. There are other countries that have this too. But I think it works really well, particularly previous question about safety. It's safe to just wander around in a city in Japan. That's totally fine, totally safe. And so we had many experiences after that where we just kind of wandered and found stuff and had a great time doing that. Let me see if I can think of anything specific when we did this. Let's see, because there were still a lot of times where we went after something specific. We were like, we want this specific food right now. Actually, some of the places that we went were in train stations. Train stations in Japan aren't just like a place to hang out with. They aren't like, they are transition points from you to go from one place to another, but they are also commercial hubs in Japan. There's so many food and department stores and people and just fun things to do in these train stations in Japan. So there were times where I was glad that we had a lot of extra time in the train station so we could wander around and eat good food and just like look at things and sometimes buy things. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And yeah, your happiness boost, yeah, that was one of them. Just taking our time in the train stations was a real joy. Fizz says, are there any resources to finding a board game group or players around you? I'm in the process of trying to find a solid group as a host. I'd recommend, I think meetup.org still works pretty well for that. I'd recommend trying that. Yeah, meetup.org. Anthony says, any more particular business practices you admired? So I did a blog post on Monday about kind of business practices that I saw in Japan. I talked about a bunch of them on the post. I don't know if I have anything beyond that post because I included a bunch of them on that post. But if you check out that post on Monday about business practices in Japan that stood out to me, yeah, they're doing some really cool things over there. The customer service and the focus on packaging in particular is incredible. Packaging and presentation is pretty incredible. But just that, really, the quality of customer service we received in Japan was spectacular across the board. Mark says, has your experience in Team Labs Tokyo encouraged you now to visit the other Team Labs locations around the world? I didn't even know there were that many around the world. But yeah, Team Labs in Tokyo, Mark's referring to an Instagram post that I posted a few days ago, was absolutely incredible. I'm posting on my personal blog, JameyStonemaier.com, about the different cities we visited. I haven't got to Tokyo yet, but that will be one of the highlights that I recommend to anyone who visits Tokyo. We went to there are two different Team Labs there. We went to a specific one in Odaiba, and it was incredible. You take your shoes off and you walk through these different places, including a whole section that's where your legs are about a foot deep into water, warm water. And I can't really even describe what happens there. There's like this visual effect in the water, but you kind of have to see it to believe it. It's an incredible, like, visual interactive museum that I would recommend to anyone going through Odaiba or Tokyo. Julio says, how much did you end up playing the games you took to Japan? Would you have taken more or less in hindsight? I think I took the right quantity of games in Japan, or the right size. I fit everything into the Flip 7 box. I had Flip 7, The Gang, and Tranquility, The Ascent. And I would say we spent around 4 or 5 nights actually playing those games. And then we had 2 other nights that we spent at game cafes. And the rest of the time, we were just really busy or really worn out, one of the two. So my thinking that we might end up playing games like every night, that did not happen. But for like what we needed, I think I took the right number of games. Yeah. Greg says, what about the future of the board game hobby makes you the most excited? Well, that's a fun question, Greg. I appreciate the positive spin on that. I mean, what does make me the most excited? I'm always excited about different ways that people are going to innovate on existing mechanisms and the new mechanisms and themes that are to come in the future. I see so many creative, interesting designs, way more than I can ever play because there's so many of them these days. So that excites me that there's a lot of creativity going into games these days. Yes, I think I'm just excited about, I don't know, this isn't very specific, but just what the things in the future that don't exist now, whether they're innovating on existing things or creating something entirely new, that is really exciting to me. Tim says, did you get to tour the baths in Shibu Onsen and see the snow monkeys? Yeah, I guess I'm behind on questions a little bit, but we did go there. We went to Shibu Onsen, which is a little resort town outside of Nagano that is focused on going to onsen, which are hot springs. We stayed in a traditional inn there that had their own hot spring there, and pretty much every inn in the town has their own hot spring, and there are a bunch of public hot springs that you can go to. each of which has a different health claim. They're like, okay, if you go to this hot spring, then your headaches will go away, or go to this one and your muscles will be more relaxed, things like that. It was a really interesting experience. We didn't go around to all the other ones. We just mainly focused on the one in our traditional inn, but we did hike up to the one where the snow monkeys hang out, and we saw 2 different snow monkeys there, just kind of chilling and enjoying the hot spring, which is really neat. In fact, animals were a big part of our time in Japan. We went to a mini pig cafe. We went to a cafe where you could pet a fennec fox and hold meerkats and ferrets and hedgehogs. And then we went to another one where you could pet a wide variety of animals, including lemurs and capybaras. They had a bunch of other animals as well, but that was the animal cafes in Japan are really, really cute and adorable, and they do seem to largely treat the animals really well. There were a few owls that didn't look all that happy because I think owls want to fly around, and they don't really get the chance to do that here. But for the most part, it seemed like they were treating the animals well at these animal cafes. Anthony says, do you feel like Japan has changed at all since you studied there? My last trip there was 10 years ago, and I feel like it is definitely a lot busier now. There are 2 things I noticed that are distinctly different from the last time I was in Japan. One is the tourism. The sheer volume of people at really everywhere, and sheer volume of foreigners in particular that are just everywhere is so much higher than when I was there 23 years ago, and particularly at tourist sites like in Kyoto, at Kiyomizu-dera, at Kinkakuji, and just everywhere. It seemed like there were a lot more foreigners living there and also being tourists there. That was one thing. I would say for better or for worse. Like I'm happy for Japan to have that amount of tourism. I'm happy for them to do it. They seem to handle it really, really well. They're very welcoming to tourists. There were still many tourists, and I would say not actually the American tourists from other countries that just couldn't seem to figure out that in Japan you walk on the left and not the right, things like that. Who would just like walk along a very busy path in a tourist area and just stop in their tracks, just not being aware of the people around you. I think that's really, really important if you're a tourist. Be aware of the people around you and be aware of the culture, and just kind of be aware and pay attention. That's really important. But for the most part, it was fine. The really good thing, and this is the other change that I see from 23 years ago, is that smoking in Japan has significantly decreased. Cigarette smoking has significantly decreased. It was, I would say, a problem when I was there. Like you could not walk around, you could not walk into a restaurant or a bar or really anywhere without breathing in cigarette smoke. But it's almost entirely gone away. We hardly smelled it at all. And while there were a few restaurants that had it, they had it relegated to like a little cubby in the back of the restaurant where people would go and smoke a cigarette if they wanted to. I hardly ever saw anyone smoking. It was completely different really than the last time I was there. Yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised by that. Michelle also says, how does it feel doing the Let's Go to Japan activities in real life? Feels great. The game gave some great recommendations of things to do. Some I knew, some I didn't know. But I would say if you're planning a trip to Japan, playing Let's Go to Japan really, really will help you plan that trip. But I actually will add that while the game focuses on Tokyo and Kyoto, which are 2 must-see places in Japan, I'd also recommend picking one place that's not a Tokyo or Kyoto, just to try out one other place. I was surprised by the number of tourists that were in places like Kanazawa and Nagano. Tourists are everywhere in Japan, including us. We were tourists there. But it's neat to find those places that are a little bit off the beaten path. Chad says, did you buy a souvenir that you didn't plan on buying in Japan? So one thing, most of what I brought back were little treats like this. I also bought some like slip-on shoes that ended up not fitting my feet. So Megan's enjoying them now. One thing that I couldn't bring back but I did buy kind of as a souvenir while I was there that really caught me off guard was when we were in Shibu Onsen, in the Nagano area in general. It's known for apples, and they had apple juice there. I don't drink apple juice in real life. I have apple cider from time to time. I like hard cider, but I don't drink apple juice because apple juice in the US, what I think of as apple juice is this really thin liquid that isn't really all that satisfying to drink. But so I tried this apple juice when I was in Nagano, in Shibu Onsen in particular, and I was blown away by how good it was. It was rich and full of flavor. It was not thin. It was almost It was thick like an apple cider, even thicker than what you know as an apple cider in the US. And it was so delicious. And so I bought this variety pack of 6 different types of apples and how they made this apple juice out of those 6 different apples. And each one, I had to drink it in Japan instead of bring it back here because it was a liquid. I couldn't bring it on as a carry-on. But they were so good. If you go to Japan, I don't know if this applies to all apple juices, but if you go to an apple making region in Japan, try their apple juice. It was surprisingly delicious. Something I would never think to try here in the US. Going somewhere else. James says that train stations in Japan are great, especially the food floors at the top. Did you enjoy any ikibin while you were traveling throughout Japan? We did have lots of food while in the stations. We were there on a day called Culture Day, so there was a very busy day where people were hawking all sorts of food. But there were just a lot of good food while we were there. I had what did I have in the stations? We did get an actual bento box at a train station to take on the train. We also got taiyaki, which is kind of a sweeter treat that you can get. We had a really good taiyaki actually while we were there. What did I order? I ordered, oh yeah, this was a food that I wasn't familiar with. It was a little bit like a bao bun, but thinner and with a nice filling. It was like this thin. I can't remember the name of it, but that was new to me. And it was like just the perfect holding in your hand food to eat. Also had some soft serve. Soft serve is all over Japan for some reason, and it's really delicious. In fact, we had some apple soft serve up in Shibu Onsen near the snow monkeys. That was really, really good. But yeah, we ate a lot of food out of the stations. William says, when is the best time to submit or pitch to a publisher? When is the worst time? It may depend on the publisher, but I was wondering if I had been increasing or decreasing my chances unknowingly based on his timing. That's a really good question, William. I think it might actually depend on the publisher. Like, I know that there are times where there are a few times a year when we launch a new product. And they are really, really busy days when I launch a new product. Like the first launch day in particular is very, very busy. And that is not that I want people emailing me with submissions anyway. That is not our submission process. Don't email me. Use our submission form on our website. But there have been a few times that people have pitched me a game on a launch day. And I don't expect them to know everything about Stonemaier Games. But if you're going to pitch to me, especially if you're going to go out of your way to email me, which isn't the right procedure anyway, launch days are by far the worst day to do it because I'm already really stressed with dealing with a bunch of troubleshooting and emails and things like that. So I know this is very specific to me in Stonemaier Games, but I would recommend if you are pitching to specific publishers, look at what those publishers are doing at that moment and just avoid like the busiest of days. If they're launching a new Kickstarter, don't contact them on that day. That is not the right day to contact a publisher because they're going to be very busy with that Kickstarter, that crowdfunding campaign, or a new product. Not the right day for that. In general, let's see if there's any in general response. I don't know if there is a bad time of year in general for like all publishers. Maybe around conventions, if they're publishers that focus on conventions, contacting them during Gen Con or like right after Gen Con or Essen probably isn't a good time. They're probably busy with a lot of things or busy catching up. But other than that, I don't think there is necessarily a bad time. Yeah, good question. Julio says, do you have any good board game or board game adjacent stocking stuffer ideas? Well, I have a few today, including our new stone eggs and our enamel pins. I think these are great little stocking stuffers. As for small box games for 2024, I mentioned The Gang earlier. I'm really enjoying The Gang. I think it's a really, really great game, and I think it does fit into a stocking. It's a pretty small game, so I'd recommend that. Garrett says, the most surprising thing in your blog about Japan so far was the lack of soap in public bathrooms. That really surprised me. Surprised me too. Why do you think that was the case? It was pretty surprising to me. Like in Japan, it's a very clean country. And it's oddly clean for a country that doesn't have many public trash cans in particular. But as part of them not having trash cans, they also don't have, in their abundance of public restrooms, they don't have towels. They don't have a way for you to dry off your hands. And in addition to that, even though they have water, they don't have soap. I don't really fully understand why. Maybe their bathrooms, they've tried to go with a kind of a low maintenance approach to their bathrooms. No trash, no soap helps with that. But But yeah, it was very odd to me. I couldn't find a good reason for it. And so my recommendation, if you go to Japan, is to go to a convenience store and get hand sanitizer. Because even though you can get your hands partially clean by using water, you probably want to use soap after using the bathroom. Anthony says, did we go to Super Nintendo World? We did not go to Super Nintendo World, no. We didn't really go to any theme park style attractions. We went to a lot of like old places like temples. And the newer places we went were kind of like animal cafes. We went to the cup noodle factory where you can make your own cup noodle. But no, we didn't go to any. We did. I was curious about Super Nintendo World, but we didn't end up going. Chad says, did Walter, our cat, give you a talking to when you got back? Walter has had a lot to say since we got back. This was, I think, the longest time that we left him alone. When we were in New Zealand, he was alone with Biddy for a while, but Walter was truly alone here. We did have a cat sitter and some friends check in on him, but yeah, he's had a lot to say. He's wanted a lot of tummy time. He's been pretty cute about it. But yeah, I don't love the idea of leaving him for 2 weeks. It's a long time to leave him. This is, how much capital do you feel is needed to launch a game? I look at Kickstarter campaigns and wonder if the original goals of 10,000 are actually enough. This is a big topic. I'll give you a short answer to a big topic, but I would recommend checking out my blog about this topic of like the funding goal and things like that, and how much money you need before the campaign. In fact, I have a very specific article about this not that long ago, about how much money do you need before launching. And I think the amount I came up with was around $4,000 to $5,000. Yeah, I think that's about the right amount that you need before a campaign. The question of how much do you actually need to raise is a completely different question about how much money that you need to manufacture and freight ship the game. I would say that's a different question that I go into in a post about the funding goal. Yeah. So Mark does touch upon one negative aspect of having more foreigners in Japan, in that, and I guess it's a little bit stereotypical here, but Japan is a very safe country, I think, because of the Japanese people in the country. The more foreigners go to Japan, I think the country does become slightly less safe. So Mark is sharing an experience here of when that happened to him. So I think that is something to keep an eye on in Japan. I think it is still an incredibly safe country, but hopefully the foreigners who decide, the non-Japanese people who decide to live in Japan will continue to be a part of that safe culture and that safe country, and not make the country less safe than it currently is. Valerie mentioned something here about places highlighted in her favorite shows like Demon Slayer and Alice in Borderlands. And I mentioned one other one here, not a show in particular, but there's a game called Monster Hunter World. I don't know the game very well, but one of the friends I was traveling with loves this game. And we went to a little soba noodle place in Nagano, in Shibu Onsen, that had their theme kind of there was collectibles, including Monster Hunter World. And we were kind of curious why. And apparently Monster Hunter World, about 11 years ago, took over this little town in Japan and redecorated. They did a whole like festival thing themed after this very popular video game in Japan. And they had a bunch of collectibles there. And as we were leaving, the owner of the store had heard us talking about it. And she gave my friend some chopsticks from this retheming of the town from 10 years ago or 11 years ago, and along with some other little trinkets. I thought that was neat that she went out of her way to do that, and that Monster Hunter World had completely redecorated an entire town themed around their game. James mentions winter as being a good off-season time to visit for less tourists. And James, I think that's a good tip. And it's also a good tip for seeing the snow monkeys. The snow monkeys, if you go to Shibu Onsen, they're going to be there in the cold. They're going to be in this hot spring when it's cold. So that's the time to see the snow monkeys. Michelle says, did you buy the Japanese chairs, like the chairs that are on the floor? We didn't buy any of those. Those would be kind of tough to bring back, but we did sit on a number of them while we were there. Johnny says there's a YouTube channel called Jet Lag that turns travel into fun games. So that's cool. They played Capture the Flag in Japan, the whole country. The game design and balance are very well. Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to check that out, Johnny. Jet Lag. Let me pull that up on YouTube before I forget. Jet Lag. I still have Jet Lag right now. Jet Lag, the game. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I was hoping to play disc golf when I was in Japan, but didn't end up happening, unfortunately. We were very active in terms of walking around quite a bit, but didn't play disc golf. Ben Brent says, are there any genres or styles of games that are way more popular in Japan? Anything surprising? Small, from what I could tell, the smaller the box, the better. And like trick-taking style games seem to be really popular there. Like just basic, not basic, but card-driven games in small boxes that play in a short playing time seem to be popular based on what Yellow Submarine had on their popular game shelf. Let me pause for a minute for the questions. I love talking about Japan, of course, and go back to the charity auction really briefly because I realize I haven't focused all that much on it. But we do have a charity auction that is live right now. Let me see if there's any other updates as well. We do have a Tokaido Facebook group. Ironclad Gears of Corruption will be back in stock in mid-December is when we're hoping to get it. There's also a really cool video I mentioned in the newsletter from Extreme Board Gaming about someone who plays apiary while covered in bees in a completely safe way. He was nervous, but he pulled it off. They did it in a safe, respectful way to bees. But the charity auction. So we are auctioning off. What I do with these charity auctions is I invite 10 different content creators that we haven't featured before, content creators that I want to share with more people. I want more people to discover these content creators. And I ask them to pick a charity that they are passionate about. And so they do that. They pick those charities, and we have an auction item or kind of a series of auction items for each of them. So like punchboard.co.uk, they chose the Mine charity here. And so we feature the auction, that charity. We feature this content creator so you can discover them. And we put up a bunch of different items for auction. So if you win this auction, you can bid here on Board Game Geek. Let me refresh it so you can see if there is a bid here. It's in the comments. You just post a comment, and that is the bid. So here's one for $7.50 is the current bid for this item. And the item is actually a collection of items that includes the new stone eggs, the enamel pins, the tray variety packs, also a custom version of Wormspan where you get to choose the dragons that are on the box, and along with all the other products that we released this year, including the individually numbered copies of Stamp Swap. The low numbered copies, 1 through 10, are as part of this auction. So if you're looking to make kind of a charitable gift at the end of the year, this is something to consider where you can put the money that you've set aside for charity towards a great charity, a great content creator, and get some cool stuff in exchange. If you don't have $500+ to spend on something like this, which I completely understand, you can just go to our web store and get a copy of the stone eggs. And we're going to donate for every copy that's sold during the charity auction. We'll donate $1 to each of the 10 auctions that we're featuring, or each of the 10 charities that we're featuring in the auction. So you can still kind of support the auction by doing that. This will be live. It's very short. It's only 48 hours. This will be over by around this time on Friday. So yeah, so if you're curious about it, check it out on our web store and on Board Game Geek right now. Any other topics? Oh, I did want to mention that today would have been my dad's birthday. My dad passed away a few years ago, and today is his birthday. So without hopefully getting too emotional about it, not that there's anything wrong about getting emotional, but I do want to finish out this live cast. But yeah. Yeah, he had cancer. He passed away, and I miss him. Yeah. Luke says, how soon before you launch a campaign should you contact manufacturers? So this is assuming that you want to be a publisher, not just be a designer, which is two different things. So if you want to run a business, you want to publish a game, I would recommend contacting a manufacturer right away, and a couple different manufacturers, and start getting quotes from them if they're willing to quote you. I love working with Panda Game Manufacturing. I think Panda is fantastic, and it's great to work with Panda well before we launch a new product, because they help us figure out what we can actually afford, like what we can fit into the budget for the game. Softball says, did we see Godzilla? We did not. We did see King Kong. King Kong, we saw like kind of a store that had in Tokyo in the San Genjaya neighborhood that had a giant King Kong. I wouldn't call it a miniature. It's kind of like a sculpture wrapped around the building. Mark says, do you think it would be a good idea to centralize the Stonemaier accounts across the web stores? He's realizing his Australia and US accounts are separate, and his champion status is only in Australia right now. So it's 4 different entities. We can't centralize them, but you can be basically, we need you to buy only from one web store. So the Australia web store is the one that services the US. If you ever move to a new country, basically, and you need to order from a different web store, reach out to us and let us know. We can help you with that transition. I don't think we can actually transfer your existing account over, but we can maybe help out with a champion status there so that you're not like completely losing your champion status. We can help out with that part of it if you end up moving. Ray says, have I seen the Martin Scorsese movie Silence? I have not seen that, but I appreciate the recommendation. Ray says, it's fascinating to watch. The cinematography in particular is often framed and shot in a way that looks like traditional Japanese art. That's really cool. I need to check that out. No, I have not seen or even heard of that movie. Okay, Mark says he's asking about this because he was thinking of gifting a Stonemaier game to a U.S. resident. For that, Mark, I see why you're asking that now. Let us know. I'm not sure about our rules for that. For if you can use your champion status on another web store, but we might be flexible about that. I would recommend contacting contact@stonemaier.com to see what our rules are about that. Devil's Treasure says, is there a link for the auction? There is. I can't really share it here in the chat, but if you go to our newsletter, it's there. You should be able to easily find it. It looks like this. I'm sorry, I'm not showing it to you. It's the Stonemaier Games charity auction. You can find it on Board Game Geek. It's a geek list here under me, Jamey Stonemaier. But I think the easiest way is to find our newsletter and click through to the auction on our newsletter. Joshua says, Survivor check-in. Without spoilers, are you still enjoying the season, hoping for anyone in particular to win? I very much am enjoying the season. We had to catch up a little bit after we came back from Japan. And I think that the casting, as usual, has been incredible in this new era. There are a few people that I'm rooting for. I don't want to say them because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, there are some people that I think are playing particularly well right now. Reggie says he just bought the stone eggs. I can't help it. It's for the children. You're right. It does. Buying the stone eggs right now does help some charities that do help children, Reggie. So I appreciate you doing that. Yeah. Thank you all for your nice comments about my dad. I appreciate that. Yeah. Your comments are making me even more emotional. I appreciate that. Yeah. Why don't we end on that note on celebrating the parents who mean a lot to us? And my mom's still around, fortunately, so that's wonderful. But I do miss my dad. Yeah. Thank you all for joining me today, for asking all the wonderful questions about Japan. That was a delight. I hope you find some joy in the charity auction and what we're offering as related to the charity auction. Yeah. Have a good day. Have a good week. I'll see you next week.